exactly did this happen?
Well, we know that there's been this, and Alex has reported a lot on this interest from Charter to get bigger, in a world where people have a lot of options outside of traditional cable, Facebook, any big platform where they can spend their time these days. The cable industry has felt like it needs to get bigger, and it has to get bigger, too, so it can spread the costs around, the costs of making the service better, more meaningful to people, and the technology that goes into that. So obviously Charter had this great interest in doing this deal with Time Warner Cable. Time Warner Cable wanted Charter to pay more money. Charter was talking to Comcast about the possibility of Comcast acquiring some of the assets of Time Warner Cable, and along the lines, they ultimately decided, Comcast, that the better move for them was to get even bigger than everybody else and have control over markets like New York and Los Angeles and Chicago, Philadelphia, the D.C. area. I mean, they truly are the biggest player in the cable business in the United States.
Right, but is this deal going to go through, Peter? The regulators made it clear with AT&T and T-Mobile that they wanted 4 wireless carriers. Is it going to be any different with cable companies?
Well, it is going to be a little different because they're different businesses. And yes, the government's absolutely going to scrutinize this very carefully. You get number 1, number 2 joining together. That automatically raises a lot of flags here in D.C. But because they don't overlap in those markets, because there's that full spectrum of competition now, not only from the satellite providers, but also from Google, the things over the Internet, this, a lot of folks I'm talking to say this is going to be looked at a little bit differently. But at the same time, they're going to ask a lot of Comcast in return. They're going to ask them to divest subscribers that would have been put them over that 30 million mark that's been sort of the magic number in terms of cable eyeballs. They're going to ask them to do a range of things with regard to net neutrality as well, protect some of the programming rights. So this is going to be a difficult process, and it's not a done deal by any means. Comcast already making the case in favor of this from the competitive standpoint. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of folks here in Washington think this will get done, although the conditions may be very painful for Comcast.
Now, we spoke with Jonathan Klein, the former president of CNN US, earlier on Bloomberg Television. I want you all to take a listen to what he had to say about this deal.
These companies have to get as big as possible, as fast as possible, in order to keep their programming costs down, in order to create even more economies of scale in marketing, back office systems, all of that stuff.
Alex, I want to bring you into this. We've been talking about Apple talking to Time Warner Cable about a new deal with Apple TV. What does this mean for innovation in the cable industry? Does that slow this down?
There's an argument it could speed it up, actually, Emily, because Comcast's technology already is superior to Time Warner Cable's. You make them even bigger. You give them more resources. You give them bigger scale. You can get more customers on the same page as far as expediting the way that people watch television. Comcast has guides, the X1 and the X2, they're called. They're state-of-the-art video guides. They look a lot more like Netflix or Amazon Prime than your 1985 cable grid that you're used to. So you add on a lot more customers to that, and it's possible that many more people can have a more advanced television viewing experience than they can today.
However, I want you to take a listen to another thing that Jonathan Klein had to say about how monopolies impact innovation. Take a listen.
The downfall of monopolies is that they take their audience for granted. And that is an enormous opportunity for newcomers to come in. So Time Warner Cable sees Apple. They'd love to be able to say to Time Warner customers, hey, don't leave us. We've got this new cool Apple thing coming down the road. The problem is Apple doesn't have content relationships.
John, what does this all mean for Apple?
I found myself thinking, Emily, today about Walter Isaacson's book on Steve Jobs and the comment where Steve, who, wasn't that big on paying for cable, decided, you know what, I'm going to sign up for Comcast. And then after signing up, he called Brian Roberts, the CEO of Comcast, and Roberts said, I thought he was going to say, hey, it's pretty cool. And Steve told me it sucks. And, I think that that's a reminder that, yes, Comcast does have some cool technology, and Brian Roberts, the CEO, does think a lot about putting out a more innovative service. But most of us view the cable companies as slow and trying to squeeze us for money, and have been hoping that there might be some new great type of TV watching experience that is much more like the experience you have on your phone. And I think that's why a lot of people have been pointing to Apple. And as Bloomberg has reported, in Apple's talks with, for example, Time Warner Cable, the challenge that Apple faces is breaking up that cable ecosystem, being able to sign competitively priced deals with all the content players that are similar to the ones that the cable companies already have.
Now, John, you also did a big interview with Disney Chairman and CEO Bob Iger. Of course, Disney owns ABC. We know Comcast owns NBC. I want to talk about this from the content perspective, but first let's take a listen to what Iger had to tell you in that interview.
Whether there's consolidation or whether the ownership of the existing multi-channel businesses changes, we're still going to be as in demand as we've been. You can't go after the multi-channel subscriber without offering them our product, so it doesn't really mean that much to us.
Now, given that Comcast also owns NBC, Peter, that adds another wrinkle into this whole potential deal. You know, how does that play into this?
Well, it's a big factor. They are not just a straight cable player. They're a content provider as well. It is an important wrinkle. And it's one of the factors here that's going to make regulators look at this differently, and why the stakes here matter far more than just cable eyeballs. It also has to deal with the programming side of things, the costs there. And one thing very important to remember is the consent decree that they signed with the government when they took on NBC. They agreed to do certain things in that deal, things to promote more competition in terms of programming, and expect very much, Emily, that they're going to have to follow that same roadmap in this deal. Perhaps they might have to even exceed that in order to win regulators' approval. That's the question for Comcast. Does this deal become too painful on that front that maybe it becomes a little bit less attractive to them? Right now, they're making the case this is competitive. They'll do some of those things, but they haven't committed to do all of them.
And Comcast did, we remember, overcome some regulatory hurdles when they did buy NBC Universal initially. Alex, what do you think? How does this actually all play out?
One important thing to look at here, Emily, is that there's no breakup fee in this deal. And that's you could interpret that several ways. One, you could say that's a little bit of confidence on both Time Warner Cable and Comcast side that something could get done. But two, if regulators did step in and block this, neither side would be paying anything. In a way, though, it also blocks out Charter, because I think Charter would have seen that the breakup fee and said, okay, if Time Warner Cable has to pay Comcast, maybe we can still make a case to Time Warner Cable shareholders that we're the better option. Without the breakup fee, it's going to be very difficult for Charter to get in here. They certainly can't pay $160 a share. They haven't up until this point. So I would say that it's probably a better than 50-50 chance at this point that Comcast will proceed as they've described here and divest some subscribers and move forward with the deal.